A javelin missile hits an APC, which loses control and drives over mines. The attack is thwarted. Now, the Russian soldiers deploy a group of Frankensteins into battle. The Ukrainians manage to capture the second Russian tank in the video. Let's see if this add-on armor can protect the tanks. Ukrainians open fire with artillery. The group splits up. The first hit. The tank moves forward slightly and explodes on mines near a forest line. Ahead, this APC awaits an unexpected surprise. Mines stop the advance. The group retreats. On another flank, Russian tanks attack. They have already become targets. One of the tanks remains mobile and tries to escape. A kamikaze drone strikes the engine compartment. The tank remains mobile, and then another Ukrainian drone attacked its turret. After moving a bit more, the tank finally stops. The third breakout attempt. This time, it's a T-90 tank. After the attack, the tank stops. A second Ukrainian drone hits the stopped tank. A Russian tank rushes into battle. It comes very close to the Ukrainian trap. A hit. The ammunition ignites. The tank is destroyed. The Bradley, in thermal sight, locks onto the target and fires a tow missile. The Bradley's missile hits the Russian tank. A Ukrainian warrior locks onto a Russian APC and fires a javelin missile. It's a hit. The missile strikes the APC. A fire starts. This APC is torn apart. The Ukrainians notice this and send, surprisingly, a drone. It approaches the SAM system without interference. They didn't spend a missile on a small drone. They lost a SAM, which is worth thousands of times more expensive than the drone. Russian soldiers on an MLRS Grad arrive to carry out a combat mission. They enter the coordinates and make a salvo of rockets. At this moment, they are already spotted by a Ukrainian recon drone. And a kamikaze drone is already headed towards the MLRS Grad. The first attack hits the cabin. The second, the launch system.
There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the fighters of the Signum unit of the 93rd Separate Mechanized Brigade showed an acute and tense moment where a Ukrainian AFPD kamikaze drone was trying to strike a moving Russian quad bike with a trailer. 2 Russian military men are sitting on it, and at least 2 Russian military men are lying in the trailer. But despite the driver's desperate attempts to maneuver, the quad bike cannot escape the attack. The drone is precisely aimed and crashes directly into the quad bike driver from the side, causing a massive explosion. As a result of the explosion, the driver's lower limb is immediately torn off in order to comply with censorship rules, and in order not to injure viewers, the most tragic moment was blurred out on video. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, The Ukrainian military demonstrated an impressive moment of destroying a Russian self-propelled gun from HIMARS and a truck with ammunition that was unloading ammunition for Russian artillery. The footage shows a truck approaching the self-propelled artillery unit to unload ammunition for further firing at Ukrainian positions. The Russian military begins unloading shells from the back of a truck and moving them to a field warehouse. The Ukrainian military understands that this is the ideal moment to attack. While Russian soldiers are busy unloading, it is possible to simultaneously destroy both the self-propelled guns and the ammunition truck with one precise shot from the HIMARS. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely fighters of the Battalion of Attack Unmanned Aerial Vehicles Achilles showed video footage where, with the help of FPV drones, they destroyed a Russian Ural truck on which a cannon was destroyed in order to destroy Ukrainian drones or drones in the sky. The footage reportedly shows a Russian truck driving slowly along a country road towards its firing position, where it is supposed to shoot down Ukrainian drones. At the moment when the truck had almost reached its target, the Ukrainian military launched an FPV drone which flies up to the back of the truck, where 3 Russian military men are seen sitting, serving as a crew operating a cannon installed to combat drones. The next second there is an accurate strike. The following shows the moment of the attack, after which the Russian truck begins to burn and smoke. And then a clip of FPV drone attacks on Russian trucks is shown, but without guns in the back. Some trucks carried personnel, and some carried ammunition and provisions. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the fighters of the Shadow unit carried out a successful ambush on a Russian convoy consisting of 2 armored combat vehicles and 1 tank. The operation reportedly begins with a Russian tank column moving across an open field, unaware of the impending attack. Ukrainian fighters took up strategic positions in advance to ensure the effect of surprise and maximum effectiveness of the attack. When the Russian column entered the affected area, Ukrainian forces immediately launched an attack. Artillery and FPV drones were the first to enter the battle, unleashing a barrage of fire on the enemy. Artillery strikes were aimed at creating chaos and disorganization in the ranks of the enemy. FPV drones equipped with explosives accurately hit targets, destroying armor and disabling equipment.
Discovered an SA-17 Grizzly surface-to-air missile system. The soldiers deployed a strike drone, which in an instant turned the equipment into a massive, spectacular explosion. The fuel in the missiles loaded on the system started to burn, and thick smoke rose into the air. The Russians tried to extinguish the fire, but they failed and realized they needed to flee. After a while, the remaining ammunition detonated. Just look at that fireworks display. Here you can see the SA-8 Gecko surface-to-air missile system, which the Russians tried to hide in the trees. However, they failed, and the artillery destroyed the equipment with a precise shot. This other air defense vehicle, the SA-13 Gopher, detected a reconnaissance drone and fired a missile at it, but it missed by a significant distance. At that moment, a kamikaze drone with a shaped charge warhead was already on its way to destroy it. The drone hit the target precisely, causing a detonation, and the vehicle began to burn. You are seeing drone footage that captured everything. The battery comprises 4 SA-21 Growler systems and a cheeseboard radar station, with a total value of $625 million. It is claimed that the system is supposed to detect and destroy ballistic missiles within a radius of up to 60 kilometers. The SA-21 Growler systems launched 6 missiles intended to destroy the target. At this moment, at an altitude of approximately 1 kilometer, the MGM-140 missile releases its cluster warhead equipped with submunitions. Another launcher fires, but almost immediately it is hit and detonates. Look at the massive explosions and the detonation of the ammunition. The area of impact is astounding. At this prepared position, an SA-10 Grumble air defense system is stationed. Usually, such systems are covered by SA-22 Greyhound units, but not in this case. Just look at that detonation. This can be described as a nuclear detonation of the SA-15 Gauntlet air defense system. Look at the enormous mushroom cloud rising into the air. This is a fairly rare Arctic SA-15 Gauntlet air defense system, worth about $50–60 million. Using a drone, the Ukrainian military targets it and fires a high-precision M982 Excalibur shell. A fire breaks out. The Russian soldiers try to extinguish the flames with a fire extinguisher but flee, realizing that the target is not yet fully destroyed and a follow-up strike is imminent. Their prediction comes true. The Ukrainians make another shot. The shell lands near the equipment, creating a small moon-like crater visible from the drone. In an open area, 2 SA-17 Grizzly systems were detected. Each system is worth around $260 million. The Ukrainian military delivered 2 precise strikes. The systems began to burn and detonate. Most likely, the Russians did not expect this equipment to be targeted. Otherwise, they would have at least tried to hide it in the nearby tree line. In this footage, an SA-17 Grizzly operates in tandem with a target illumination and missile guidance radar station. They are moving away from their position, but a drone catches up and strikes the SA-17 Grizzly. The radar station meets the same fate. The equipment is burning, and the crew abandons the vehicle and flees as far as possible. The SA-15 Gauntlet in an open area was also destroyed by a precise strike from the Ukrainian military. This SA-13 Gopher air defense system was attempted to be camouflaged in the trees, but the drone sees everything. The equipment was destroyed and continued to burn among the trees. In this footage, you can see the M142 HIMARS in action. An SA-17 Grizzly paired with a radar station moves into position. A reconnaissance drone tracks them to their location. Once the equipment is in position, HIMARS launches a rocket. The explosion sends everything flying spectacularly in all directions with glowing hot debris. And here is the work of Ukrainian artillery. An SA-17 Grizzly was spotted on combat duty with a full ammunition load. The artillerymen fired a shot, hitting the target precisely. The equipment exploded, causing one of its missiles to detonate and fly off on a random trajectory. The drone operator decides they need a fine for traffic violations and sends a kamikaze drone to deliver an explosive ticket directly to the radar station and the launcher. Later, the equipment was towed to the roadside impound lot, where it continued to burn. This air defense system was spotted by a drone among the ruins of an industrial site. Most likely, the Russian soldiers noticed they were being watched from the air and decided to relocate the equipment into one of the buildings. This building is industrial, and their structures are usually very sturdy, so deploying M142 HIMARS or artillery is not practical. It was decided to send a drone. The drone navigates through the damaged walls of the building where the SA-8 Gecko is located and strikes. In the reconnaissance footage, a lot of smoke can be seen coming from the building. Perhaps this is simply the destruction of expensive targets. Or maybe it is preparation for the arrival of F-16 aircraft, which Ukrainian pilots will receive soon. Share your thoughts in the comments below. And now, let's return to the battlefield. In the middle of a field stands an SA-8 Gecko. In the blink of an eye, this air defense system is struck by an artillery shell. There's literally nothing left of the equipment. Take a closer look. It's truly a heap of scrap metal. The vehicle moves into a densely vegetated area. The Russian soldiers think they have successfully camouflaged the equipment. Indeed, without tracking its movements, it would have been difficult to spot. They leave the vehicle and walk away. A short while later, artillery destroys the air defense system with 2 shots. When the soldiers return, they will find a well-camouflaged heap of useless, charred metal. Kursk region, Russia. The military is forming a convoy of at least 15 trucks. They feel safe on their territory because the border with Ukraine is still far away. Unexpectedly, a swarm of drones begins to attack them, striking the head and tail of the convoy. The equipment starts burning with thick black smoke. The Russians realize that their vehicles inside the convoy are blocked and could also be destroyed. They drive off the road into the field and disperse. The soldiers tried to hide the equipment among the bushes and trees, but where the eagle flies, the hare cannot hide. One by one, the drones start methodically destroying the equipment. This convoy was an important logistical component for the Russian forces in the city of Vovchansk. The key word is was. The Ukrainian military turned the trucks into burning heaps of metal in the field, which will no longer leave Russia. And here is the reason why this operation was successful.
The AFU tracked down a huge support column on the territory of the Russian Federation. Point-blank strikes to the head and tail of the column. The rest of the vehicles spread out as best they could, but this doesn't help them much. Ukrainian drone pilots track them down and burn them all to the ground. This operation was a major setback to the Russian command's plans. These 2 stranded Russian tanks were also preparing to head for the Ukrainian borders, but the AFU spots them just in time. The first artillery shell flies past, but it scares everyone who was there, and the tanks were left unprotected, which allowed the drone pilots to destroy them without resistance. On the Eastern Front, this convoy is trapped. Ukrainian artillery starts as soon as the enemy gets on the radar. Something slows down one of the tanks. It made the entire column an easy target. Within moments, it was spectacularly destroyed. An anti-tank missile hits the side of an APC. It loses control and stops. The first tank hits a mine, but still continues to move. Armored vehicles are approaching the industrial zone of the city. Panic and chaos ensue. The APC became the target of a Ukrainian ATGM. The Russians realize the operation has failed and begin to flee. A Frankenstein APC is hit by a mine. One group almost gets away, but the AFU couldn't let them go. A shot from a javelin. A hit. Another one. Looks like they're not going home today. This EMP tried very much to be hidden, but it was spotted by the HIMARS. The first shot. The second. The third. They'll have to hide it better next time. Another fat target. Fascinating accuracy. A Russian Zala UAV was operating nearby. It too was hit by the HIMARS. The Russians were hiding in this landing. A Bradley arrived to knock them out. But there was a surprise ahead. Look how good the Bushmaster cannon is. Two Russian APCs have been spotted not far from here. They had no idea what was waiting for them. A Bradley rides out to them. Shots fired from a TOW. The town of Siversk, Bakhmut region. We see the defensive positions and the direction of the invaders' attack. 2 Russian tanks and 4 APCs with infantry begin the attack. The AFU opened fire using artillery. One of the shells hits near the MTLBs. They were the main target. The main thing is to prevent the attackers from getting close to the trenches. The Russian APCs have been slowed down, but the tanks that pushed their way through are still moving. Maybe the comms were cut. A drone hits one of the lagging targets. Reinforcements are on their way down the other road. A T-72 from the first group hits a mine, but somehow manages to keep moving. Now they realize that it's too dangerous to go that way, and turn into the field. The same tank is hit again. This time it's attacked by a drone. There's a hit, but again, no critical damage. The Ukrainian trenches are already very close. The first group is closing in, and the far group is firing. The tanks realize they have no infantry and retreat. This lack of coordination is fatal for them. Hit right in the engine. That APC did not survive the encounter with a Bradley. And this one couldn't hide from a Javelin. And this is what's left of the Russian equipment in a few days. A tank with a mine flail isn't afraid of anything. Well, it should be. It hits a few mines and becomes incapacitated. Drones can be incredibly effective with decent skill, like this here. A precise strike, and we see an incredible fire show. Yet another example of unbelievable precision. A hit to the engine compartment, and the tank breaks down into molecules. Even a T-90 can't survive a good hit. A few drones take out the turret. Now, it's time to finish the job. And here, one little $500 drone blows this tank's turret clean off. Take a look at how spectacular it is again. A BMP is moving towards Ukrainian positions. The ATGM operator lets it pass forward to shoot it in the rear. A Russian APC and a tank were spotted in a neighboring road. The drone hits right into the engine of the Russian meat pot. The precise strike causes it to lose control. The tank continues on its way. First drone hit. Second. The crew escapes, but the tank could not be saved. The Donetsk region. Russian equipment is on its way to the assault. They come closer. An RPG was ready. The shot. A hit. The second one. Another tank was set up. A mine is tearing a hole in the bottom of this tank. Take a look at it from a different angle. This T-72 hits the first mine. As it turns around, it hits the second one. Another epic explosion. The fire gets to the ammo. Take another look. The turret launches about 15 meters high. This is a Strela 10 SAM that's really messing up the AFU's life. Another SAM. This one's worth several $1 million. A precise hit. And this Masta C SPH exploded along with its ammunition. A powerful explosion. This one's worth about $2 million. The Pokrovsk region. A column of Russian equipment being led by a tank plans to ruin everything. A Ukrainian drone strike blinds the T-72, and it falls into a shell crater and doesn't let the tanks pass. The column then becomes a very easy target for the AFU artillery. Then, drones fly up and burn the remaining pieces of scrap metal. 5:30 in the morning. A large column moving in the same direction. The AFU were ready. With one of their first shots, the artillery damages the Russian APC. The tanks are the first to go. One of them hits a mine, but still continues to move. There's a hit from an ATGM. We can see that this time, the Russians are moving in a coordinated manner towards the AFU positions. A T-72 hits a mine. Javelins are being fired. A precision hit. The tank is critically damaged. The Ukrainians try to meet the column with ATGMs, but without success. Under the cover of the tanks, the Russians manage to land infantry. The APC that starts to retreat is blown up by a mine. And now, the trench battle begins.
There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely soldiers of the 47th Separate Mechanized Brigade ambushed an elite Russian assault group, which was moving in a column consisting of tanks and armored personnel carriers near Avdiivka. It is reported that fighters from a company of attack drones ambushed an elite Russian assault group in the village of Berdishi. Namely, the Ukrainian defenders took up more advantageous positions in advance, and during the battle, with the help of FPV drones, they were able to destroy several units of Russian equipment. In the first episode, a Ukrainian FPV drone flew into Russian armored vehicles, which were transporting infantry directly on the vehicle. Although an iron grill was welded onto the armored vehicle in order to prevent kamikaze drones from delivering a more accurate attack on the vehicle. But in this case, there was still a scattering of fragments as a result of the explosion, which caused the main damage and damage to the Russian occupiers. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the soldiers of the 47th Separate Mechanized Brigade, using FPV drones, brilliantly destroyed the Russian infantry, which was trying to gain a foothold in one of the houses of local residents. It is reported that the Ukrainian armed forces smashed the building to the foundation in which Russian infantry tried to gain a foothold. This happened in an occupied village in the village of Berdichi, Donetsk region. The destruction of Russian military infantry, which tried to occupy strategically important positions in the house of local residents, is an important step in protecting civilians and ensuring the security of the territory. The corresponding video, shot by an unmanned aerial vehicle, shows how the enemy decided to hide from the Ukrainian armed forces in one of the houses of local residents. There was excellent news from the Cherson direction, namely Flying Skull aerial reconnaissance fighters showed the moment of destruction of the Russian self-propelled artillery unit Payan, which was firing at the positions of the Ukrainian military near the village of Kostogrizovo Kherson region. It is reported that, with the help of reconnaissance, the location of the enemy self-propelled artillery unit Payan was established, which fired at a firing position and tried to hide in one of the forest plantations in the Kherson region. As a result of the adjustments and the provided target designations, the defense forces fired at the target using the HIMARS multiple launch rocket system. As a result of the strike, the enemy's self-propelled artillery installation was successfully destroyed. It is obvious that the Ukrainian military delivered the first strike with very high surgical precision, and as a result, the shell fell directly on a Russian self-propelled artillery unit and completely destroyed it. Judging by the explosion and scattering of debris, it appears that the Ukrainian military used a GMLRS projectile. There was excellent news from the Kherson direction, namely, the defense forces of the south of Ukraine destroyed a rare Russian electronic warfare station Field 21. Designed to suppress satellite navigation channels, which the Russians were proud of and shouted to the whole world that there were no analogs and it was almost impossible to destroy it. It is reported that the armed forces of Ukraine, using the coordinates received from the Ukrainian Shark reconnaissance drone, launched a strike from the HIMARS multiple launch rocket system at a gas station in the village of Veliki Kopany, Kherson region, where at that moment the Russian electronic warfare station Field 21 was located. This is one of the newest Russian radar systems of the Russian army, which is designed to protect strategically important objects from cruise missiles, unmanned aerial vehicles, and guided bombs. As stated, the complex can control airspace within a radius of more than 50 kilometers. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the Russian military showed the moment how a Ukrainian FPV kamikaze drone tries to strike a moving Russian ATV in the vicinity of Avdiivka, but unfortunately explodes a few meters from the target. It is reported that the Russian military showed a video shot with an action camera that was mounted on the head of one of the Russian soldiers. As a result, the Ukrainian FPV drone fell a little to the right of the target in the field. But this did not prevent the Russian military from receiving several moderate injuries from the explosion of an FPV drone as a result of flying fragments. The Ukrainian FPV drone, although it did not reach the specified target, still caused a certain severity of injury. This incident highlights how dangerous and unpredictable the tactics and techniques used in modern warfare can be. Ukrainian unmanned aerial vehicles, including kamikaze drones, are becoming increasingly used to carry out targeted strikes against enemies, but they also pose risks to their own forces and civilians.
Look, a Ukrainian drone equipped with a powerful anti-tank grenade managed to fly right into the open hatch of the Russian tank through the pierced metal mesh. Clearly, no tank can remain intact after such a generous deed. Look at another Russian tank, the T-80, which tried to break through along the railway tracks. If the tank has no additional protection against drones, then it's definitely game over for it. Just look at how clumsy the Russians are. The tank and APC moved out on a mission, but ahead they encounter two Russian APCs that have been blown up by a mine. This means the area here is mined, but the Russians decide to take the risk. And they failed. Angered, the Russians then sent another two tanks to the same place, one of which was a turtle tank. But just look at what happened. A precise drone strike turns the turtle tank into useless scrap metal. So, add another two tanks to the list of Russian losses. Additionally, to further frustrate the Russians, the Ukrainians tracked down and destroyed a Tu-S-19 self-propelled howitzer. However, the enraged Russians were already preparing a new wave of attacks. Sometime later, Russian commanders sent another two APCs accompanied by a T-90 tank. The Ukrainians know how to root them out. A few well-placed bombs always come in handy. After such precise hits, the Russians have no chance of continuing their advance. But they still continue to send new tanks to advance. another tank was blown up. This tank hit a mine, was abandoned, and then destroyed by a dropped grenade. This is how the Russians lose dozens of armored vehicles daily. And despite all of this, they continue to go on offensive. This might be the most foolish and senseless war in history. Just imagine, Ukrainian forces have already destroyed more than 15,000 Russian armored vehicles of various types. And the Russian industry cannot keep up with producing more of them. In the morning, a Ukrainian drone came to finish it off. That night, the Russians lost several more tanks on the battlefield, including turtle tanks. Look at how the Ukrainian drones deal with the Russian turtle tanks. In one of them, all its ammunition detonated, turning it into a fireball. Later in the day, a swarm of Ukrainian drones tore apart another group of Russian armored vehicles. On the battlefield, there was even a T-62 tank spotted, which was built in 1962, when humans first went to space. When the other Bradley arrived at the first one, we can clearly see 3 soldiers getting into it. This means that all of them survived, which is great news. Moreover, during the evacuation of the soldiers, the second Bradley was hit by a Russian FPV drone, but withstood the impact. On the way back, the second Bradley was under constant fire from Russian artillery, but it still managed to complete the mission. And now I want to show you another story in which you can also take part. Near the city of Bakhmut, the Russians lost 2 tanks, but quickly organized another attack by sending 1 tank and 2 APCs with infantry. The Russian armored vehicles moved under heavy fire from Ukrainian artillery, but still managed to get close to the Ukrainian positions. Look at what happened next. A Ukrainian soldier launched an anti-tank grenade, but it missed the Russian tank. The Russians continued to advance, simultaneously firing at the Ukrainian trenches. After a few minutes, they were almost at the trenches. Then the Ukrainians fired a 3rd grenade, and again, it missed the tank. Now, I want to ask you a question. Why couldn't the Ukrainians hit the Russian tank 3 times? However, the APC withstood the drone strike and continued moving. The Ukrainians then remotely mined the road in front of the Russian APC, and at a certain point, it drove over a Ukrainian mine and exploded. Later, another Ukrainian drone set the APC on fire, and it was completely destroyed, thwarting the Russian mission.
There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the fighters of the 46th Separate Airmobile Brigade demonstrated the highest level of skill by destroying 2 Russian 72E tanks using conventional FPV kamikaze drones during battles near the village of Mariinki. The video reportedly begins with exciting footage of a Ukrainian FPV drone circling the first Russian tank, which is equipped with additional protection on the turret. You can see how the drone maneuvers, assessing the target and choosing the optimal point for attack. At some point, the drone makes a U-turn and rushes towards the tank at full speed. A huge explosion follows and footage shows the tank being instantly hit. There was excellent news from the Kharkov direction, namely, The video begins with 6 Russian soldiers entering the house of local residents, trying to hide from Ukrainian drones and not attract unnecessary attention on the street. However, their attempt to escape was unsuccessful, as a large number of cars parked near the house immediately attracted the attention of Ukrainian drone operators. An attack soon follows, where a kamikaze drone approaches the building and a powerful explosion occurs, destroying the hiding military. The attack doesn't end there. The next shot shows a Ukrainian drone dropping explosive ammunition directly into a hole in the roof of one of the buildings where Russian troops were also stationed. Precision bombing results in another explosion, causing significant damage to the enemy. In one of the episodes, a kamikaze drone attacks working equipment engaged in the construction of trenches and fortifications for Russian troops in the suburbs of Volchansk. The explosion destroys the equipment, disrupting plans to strengthen defensive positions. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the artillerymen of the Ukrainian armed forces showed the moment of the destruction of 2 Russian self-propelled units of enemy equipment with which they fired at the positions of our military in the Bakhmut direction. The video was assembled from several episodes filmed by unmanned aerial vehicles, whose operators searched for targets, adjusted fire on them, and recorded the result. First, hits are shown on a self-propelled gun, which was located to the left, and then we can see how the operator's camera is aimed at an artillery unit, which was located to the right and from which the crew tried to get out, but fate was not on his side at that moment. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the fighters of the Kurt Company unit, as part of the 28th Separate Mechanized Brigade, demonstrated an impressive moment of destroying a 3-story building with Russian military personnel inside using an FPV drone with an enlarged warhead. It is reported that the video begins with 3 Russian soldiers trying to get inside through a broken window of a 3-story building to their comrades, who have already set up a temporary deployment point there. The house is bustling with activity, where you can see how the Russians are preparing for the next operations, not suspecting that they are already being monitored by a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone. Ukrainian operators waste no time and decide to act immediately. They fly a kamikaze FPV drone with a larger warhead to get maximum effect from the explosion. The drone skillfully maneuvers its way through a broken window on the first floor. A few seconds later, a powerful explosion occurs. The camera captures the moment when one part of the 3-story building turns into a pile of ruins. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, Ukrainian strike operators showed a moment filmed by a drone showing a daring attempt by Russian forces to pull back their damaged tank on the line of combat contact with the help of an armored tractor. When the armored tractor begins to move, FPV drone operators decide to take action. The first drone heads towards the target, quickly maneuvering towards the tractor. At the moment of impact, an explosion occurs which disables the front part of the car, stopping its movement. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, Special Operations Forces soldiers demonstrated an impressive moment of destroying the Russian Bukhim-2 anti-aircraft missile system while loading a truck onto a trawl in the village of Serebesh. The video reportedly begins with a Ukrainian Shark drone monitoring the movement of a Russian anti-aircraft missile system in the village of Serebesh. The anti-aircraft complex moved slowly through the village. As it later turned out, he was on his way to load a truck onto the trawl, which would transport this installation somewhere else. The footage shows how the Buk drives up to the truck and begins to drive onto the trawl. At this point, Ukrainian operators decide to take action, launching the Switchblade loitering munition. The Switchblade ammunition, known for its high accuracy and destructive power, crashes into the Buk precisely at the moment when the complex has already entered the trawl. As a result of the impact, a strong fire begins, and soon after this, the ammunition located in the anti-aircraft complex detonates. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, soldiers of the 109th Separate Territorial Defense Brigade and the Muramasa unit demonstrated the moment of destruction of a Russian armored KAMAZ truck of the Mustang model, transporting personnel and provisions near the village of Krasnohorivka. The video reportedly begins with a Ukrainian FPV drone trying to catch up with a Russian armored truck that was carrying 12 people from a combat position to redeployment to the rear. The drone approaches the target, finds a weak spot, and strikes the left wheel. As a result of the explosion, the wheel shatters into pieces and the truck is forced to stop. Without wasting any time, the Ukrainian military launches a second FPV drone. This drone precisely targets the cab of the truck and strikes the driver and his passenger, who have not yet managed to leave the affected area. Meanwhile, the Russian soldiers in the back realize that their lives are under threat and rush to leave the car and scatter in different directions. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the fighters of the 58th Separate Motorized Infantry Brigade demonstrated an impressive moment when, with the help of a tank, they successfully repulsed a Russian tank breakthrough near Staromlinovka. The video reportedly begins with a Russian tank column moving along a forest belt. A Ukrainian tank hidden in ambush begins firing at the advancing Russian tanks. The first shot shows a Ukrainian tank opening fire. The shell hits the medium tank of the Russian column, resulting in a powerful explosion. A flash and thick black smoke rise from the field, signaling serious damage and possible destruction of enemy equipment. This strike creates confusion among the Russian troops, who did not expect such a sudden and precise attack. The video also includes footage from a different angle taken from the side of a Ukrainian tank. These images show how well trained the Ukrainian tank crews are. Every shot is accurate and calculated. There was excellent news from the Kharkov direction, namely, the Grum aerial reconnaissance fighters showed a strike from the HIMARS multiple launch rocket system on a Russian brigade that was building fortifications several kilometers from the contact line. The Ukrainian military, having assessed the situation, decided to use the HIMARS multiple launch rocket system. This system is equipped with ammunition with 182,000 tungsten balls, which provides significant damage within the impact radius. At the moment of the attack shown in the video, it becomes obvious how effective this blow was. The result of the impact is visible in the subsequent frames. The area where construction work was carried out was turned into ruins. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the fighters of the 109th Separate Territorial Defense Brigade and the Muramasa unit with the Cicada unit demonstrated an impressive moment when a Russian infantry fighting vehicle with a landing party of 8 people tried to break through the Ukrainian defense line east of the village of Novokalinov. The video reportedly begins with a Ukrainian drone recording the movement of a Russian infantry fighting vehicle. The car slowly moves across the field, accompanied by soldiers who are on the armor. At this point, the unit's drone operators decide it is time to act. The first attack occurs quickly and effectively. The drone accurately hits the BAMP, causing a powerful explosion. The footage shows how the vehicle continues to move by inertia, and the troops on the armor find themselves within the blast radius. Russian soldiers begin to rush around, trying to find cover or escape. A second drone also targets the remaining Russian soldiers. Seeing that their breakout attempt has failed, some of them try to take cover in nearby thickets or behind the remains of their equipment. There was excellent news from the Kherson direction, namely, Ukrainian aerial reconnaissance fighters demonstrated an impressive moment of attack on a Russian minibus that was transporting wounded military personnel to the rear to the first aid station. But today, this trip was the last for them. The video begins with a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone spotting a Russian minibus, which is picking up wounded Russian soldiers near the contact line and taking them to the rear for rehabilitation. The attack was planned in 2 stages. The first FPV drone attacks the minibus while it is still moving. An explosion occurs, which forces the driver and passenger to quickly run out of the car to assess the extent of the destruction. The second Ukrainian FPV drone is sent to finish off a Russian minibus, inside of which there are wounded military personnel. This blow turns out to be more powerful and accurate. A second, stronger explosion occurs, which significantly damages the vehicle. After the second impact, the driver and passenger try to reach a stretcher, possibly to save someone after the explosion. There was excellent news from the Zaporozhye direction, namely fighters of the Ukrainian armed forces successfully destroyed a large Russian automotive supply convoy using the HIMARS multiple launch rocket system. The video reportedly begins with a surveillance drone spotting a Russian convoy consisting of at least 7 trucks and 2 armored vehicles. Russian equipment stopped on the road in one of the populated areas, not suspecting that it was being watched from the air. The following footage shows how another Ukrainian drone records the situation at a distance of about half a kilometer. It can be seen how the column begins to receive strikes from the HIMARS system. Powerful explosions shake the ground, and on the screen you can see fiery flashes and clouds of smoke rising into the sky. After a series of attacks, a Ukrainian drone flies closer to the scene to record the results of the attack. The picture that opens before the viewer is impressive. Namely, the entire Russian column, until recently safe and sound, is now burning and blazing. There was excellent news from the Kharkov direction, namely, the soldiers of the Gryphon unit of the 501st Separate Marine Battalion of the Marine Corps demonstrated an impressive moment of destroying 5 Russian infantrymen using an FPV drone. The video begins with a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone capturing the movement of 5 Russian infantrymen across an open area. As it turned out later, they were heading to a garage cooperative, where one of the garages of local residents was used as a transfer point. When Russian soldiers ran into the garage, the operators of the Ukrainian FPV drone decided to act immediately. The garage door was still open, allowing the drone to fly inside without obstruction. This decision was strategically important, since an attack in an enclosed space significantly increased the chances of success, increasing the lethality of explosion fragments. Next comes the moment of attack, where the FPV drone is precisely aimed at the open garage door and produces a powerful explosion. There was excellent news from the Kherson direction, namely, aerial reconnaissance fighters of the 1st Separate Battalion of the Marine Corps demonstrated the moment. When a Ukrainian FPV kamikaze drone launched a precise strike on a Russian vehicle containing the commanding staff of one of the units in the city of Novaya Kakhovka. 3 people come out of a nearby building and get into a car. The car starts moving and heads towards the local bazaar, a fairly crowded place. Ukrainian drone operators are aware of the need for caution to avoid civilian casualties. The car stops at the market, and the 3 commanders and the driver remain inside. At this moment, the Ukrainian FPV kamikaze drone begins its mission. Operators carefully calculate the flight path to minimize the risk to others. The drone flies up to the target, and in a split second a powerful explosion occurs. The car is instantly engulfed in flames. This precise strike eliminates the unit commander, his 2 assistants and the driver. The destruction of the command staff in Novaya Kakhovka not only weakened the operational capabilities of the Russian unit, but also showed that no target remains beyond the reach of Ukrainian forces. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, fighters of the 47th Separate Mechanized Brigade and operators of the Strike Drones Company unit successfully repelled an attempt to break through Russian troops using 1 tank, 2 infantry fighting vehicles, and infantry. The video reportedly begins with a Ukrainian drone capturing the movement of an enemy mechanized column heading towards Ukrainian positions. The first to come under attack is the Russian infantry fighting vehicle. A Ukrainian FPV drone delivers a precise strike, causing an explosion that stops the infantry fighting vehicle and leaves the crew demoralized. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the fighters of the Signum unit of the 93rd Separate Mechanized Brigade showed an acute and tense moment where a Ukrainian FPV kamikaze drone was trying to strike a moving Russian quad bike with a trailer, where wounded Russian soldiers were lying. The video reportedly begins with exciting footage of a Ukrainian FPV drone chasing a Russian quad bike. 2 Russian military men are sitting on it, and at least 2 Russian military men are lying in the trailer. But despite the driver's desperate attempts to maneuver, the quad bike cannot escape the attack. The drone is precisely aimed and crashes directly into the quad bike driver from the side, causing a massive explosion. As a result of the explosion, the driver's lower limb is immediately torn off in order to comply with censorship rules, and in order not to injure viewers, the most tragic moment was blurred out on video. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the soldiers of the 47th Separate Mechanized Brigade demonstrated a brilliant confrontation in close combat between a Ukrainian Bradley fighting vehicle and a Russian armored personnel carrier with infantry. It is reported that the video begins with a Russian armored personnel carrier with troops on board at full speed trying to break through Ukrainian positions in the Pokrovki direction in order to gain a foothold in one of the nearby villages. However, their attempt was quickly stopped, since an American Bradley, driven by a Ukrainian crew, was already waiting for them on the road. As soon as the Ukrainian crew noticed the movement of Russian armored vehicles, they immediately opened fire. The Russian armored personnel carrier in turn returned fire at the Ukrainian armored vehicle. Meanwhile, the Bradley continued to attack the Russian armored personnel carrier, despite having a so-called barbecue of homemade protection attached to the top of the armor, presumably to protect against FPV drone attacks. There was excellent news from the Kherson direction, namely, soldiers of the 38th Separate Marine Brigade successfully eliminated the deployment point of Russian FPV drone operators in the village of Krinky on the left bank of the Dnieper. The video reportedly begins with a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone spotting the location of Russian drone operators. On a tree near the building where they settled, an antenna was noticeable, designed to improve communications. The footage shows one of the Russian soldiers running out of the house to pick up his FPV drone, which he had previously landed on the ground near the house. Then he quickly returns back, trying not to attract too much attention to himself. The Ukrainian military assesses the situation and decides to attack. Several Ukrainian FPV drones take turns striking the building where Russian operators were hiding. As a result of precise strikes, the building was completely destroyed. There was excellent news from the Kherson direction, namely, the fighters of the Grum group under the leadership of Roman Kostenko showed the moment how, with the help of a civilian drone, they destroyed the positions of the invaders, from which fire was fired from an anti-tank missile system at the positions of the Ukrainian military. It is reported that the video footage shows how a Russian military man with an anti-tank missile system took a strategically advantageous position on the second floor of one of the houses of local residents. This was a commanding height that made it possible to conduct targeted fire on Ukrainian positions. The enemies felt safe and were sure that no one would notice them. The decision was made to use a civilian drone equipped with grenades for the attack. When the drone reached the desired point, the operator dropped grenades. As a result of an accurate hit, one Russian soldier was killed, and two who were next to him were injured. The explosion also damaged the building in which the firing position was located. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the fighters of the Shadow unit carried out a successful ambush on a Russian convoy consisting of 2 armored combat vehicles and 1 tank. The operation reportedly begins with a Russian tank column moving across an open field, unaware of the impending attack. Ukrainian fighters took up strategic positions in advance to ensure the effect of surprise and maximum effectiveness of the attack. When the Russian column entered the affected area, Ukrainian forces immediately launched an attack. Artillery and FPV drones were the first to enter the battle, unleashing a barrage of fire on the enemy. Artillery strikes were aimed at creating chaos and disorganization in the ranks of the enemy. FPV drones equipped with explosives accurately hit targets, destroying armor and disabling equipment. Following this, Ukrainian forces used anti-tank missile systems aimed at armored vehicles and a tank. Accurate missile strikes destroyed the armored vehicles, leaving the enemy no chance of salvation. From intercepted enemy conversations, it became known that as a result of this operation, losses among Russian military personnel exceeded 20 people. In addition, 2 armored fighting vehicles and 1 tank were destroyed. There was excellent news from the Lugansk direction, namely the fighters of the FPV strike group Apache unit demonstrated an impressive moment of destruction of the Russian OZA anti-aircraft missile system. This complex protected an important Russian military facility from missile attacks by Ukrainian forces in the city of Lysychansk. It is reported that the video begins with a Russian OSA air defense system standing in a combat position in the private sector of the city of Lysychansk. Then the complex begins to move, probably changing its position. As it turned out later, the Wasp was on its way to its base in the hangar for parking and part-time rest. It was this moment that the Ukrainian military took advantage of. Quickly assessing the situation and realizing that delay could cost them a missed opportunity, they decide to attack. The video shows how the first Ukrainian FPV drone begins its movement. The drone operator skillfully guides the drone to its target, while maintaining the lowest possible altitude to avoid detection by other air defense systems. A few seconds later, the moment of attack occurs, where the drone crashes into the Wasp and an explosion follows. Unfortunately, one blow was not enough. Then a new FPV drone makes its second pass, which also attacks the hangar, but the explosion is still not very strong. And finally, the third FPV drone attacks, causing a massive explosion, causing the Russian complex to begin to burn violently. There was excellent news from the Belgorod region, where fighters of the Quick Death Unit of the State Border Service of Ukraine successfully liquidated the base of Russian intelligence officers who were organizing forays into the Ukrainian border territory in order to conduct various reconnaissance activities. It is reported that the video begins with footage in which a Ukrainian drone recorded the location of Russian intelligence officers on Russian territory in the Belgorod region. They were located in the house of local residents and performed various tasks such as mining the territory and collecting information about the movement of Ukrainian equipment in the border zone. Ukrainian drone operators decided to act immediately while all the scouts were in the house. The first FPV drone fell next to the front door, collapsing part of the facade and injuring several military personnel with shrapnel. The explosion blew out the windows of the house, causing panic among those inside. Two Russian soldiers ran outside to understand what had happened, but soon returned back to the house. Without wasting any time, the Ukrainian military launched a second FPV drone. This strike was more successful. As a result of the explosion, the house caught fire like a match, and all the Russian intelligence officers inside were killed. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely fighters of the Eyes of Retribution Inquisition units of the 58th Separate Motorized Infantry Brigade, the 55th Separate Artillery Brigade and the 79th Separate Air Assault Brigade successfully ambushed a Russian mechanized column near the city of Krasnogorodka. The video shot by a Ukrainian drone reportedly shows the movement of a group of Russian armored vehicles, including one T-72 tank, one T-80 tank and 3 infantry fighting vehicles, all equipped with additional turtle armor. A Russian column advances across an open field, unaware of the impending attack. When they enter the range of Ukrainian artillery, shelling begins. The first artillery strikes are carried out, but unfortunately the explosions occur a few meters from the targets. The Ukrainian military, having assessed the situation, understands that artillery will not be able to effectively hit the entire column. So they decide to use FPV drones. This tactic proves successful, with some Russian armored vehicles being blown up by mines pre-planted along the way, some vehicles hit by artillery fire, but the bulk of the work being done by kamikaze drones. Explosions hit cars, causing fires and destruction. The Russian military personnel who were in the armored vehicles find themselves in panic. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the fighters of the 59th Separate Motorized Infantry Brigade successfully repelled an attempt to break through Russian troops with the help of one javelin and an anti-tank mine. The operation took place near the village of Pervomeskoye, and included the destruction. It is reported that the video begins with a frame where a Russian column of 3 armored vehicles is seen moving on the offensive near the village of Pervomeskoye. Literally a minute later, the first armored vehicle explodes on an anti-tank mine, which the Ukrainian military had previously installed. The explosion is powerful, and the armored vehicle instantly breaks down, blocking the path of the rest of the column. The remaining vehicles do not stop and continue moving under artillery fire. At this moment, the Ukrainian military decides to use the Javelin at Chigem to knock out the infantry fighting vehicle, which was second behind the tank. The video clearly shows how the missile is launched and the Javelin accurately hits the target, and the armored vehicle explodes. The Russian infantry fighting vehicle begins to smoke heavily, but by inertia it continues to move until it finally stops. Seeing this situation, the crew of the Russian tank understands that the assault has failed. They decide to retreat and begin moving in the opposite direction. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the fighters of the 47th Separate Mechanized Brigade and the operators of the Strike Drones Company unit demonstrated an impressive attack moment when they managed to hit the Russian military, sending a wounded comrade to the first aid station. It is reported that the video begins with a Ukrainian drone recording 3 Russian military personnel in the village of Soloviev. 2 of them lead the third, who is obviously wounded by hand. They carefully make their way to the stabilization aid station located in a concrete hangar. The situation around them is calm, and it would seem that nothing portends trouble. However, a Ukrainian FPV drone is already circling in the sky, carefully monitoring the movements of the Russian military. As soon as they enter the hangar, the drone operator immediately directs the device to the target. Seconds later, an explosion is heard as the drone crashes into a concrete building. Following the first drone, the second, third, and finally the fourth drone are sent to the hangar. Each of them hits the target precisely, creating a series of powerful explosions. These attacks cause significant damage inside the hangar. The Russian soldiers inside were at least additionally injured by flying shrapnel, and possibly worse.